Penticton is growing, and at its fastest rate in 24 years. So, what does that mean? Where does everybody live, considering a nearly non-existent rental market and a housing market with an average house price of over $600,000? We will delve deeply into Penticton's growth today on PenTALKton. Hello, Penticton, and welcome to PenTALKton, a podcast from the City of Penticton, discussing some of the hot topics in our community. My name is Dale Corey, a longtime resident, a serious V's hockey and speedway racing fan, and these days a big soccer fan. I get involved. I know many of you get involved as well. We do it to help shape our city. This podcast will take a deeper look at some of the conversations that are happening in Penticton. So, let's get going with today's topic, growth in Penticton.
As long as we got each other, we got the world spinning right in our hands, baby, you and me. We gotta be.
For those of you who don't remember, that's the intro music from the 80s TV show Growing Pains. Yeah, we played that song to highlight what we are discussing today, Penticton's increase in population, according to the latest Canadian census. Our guests today from the City of Penticton, Anthony Haddad, General Manager of Community Services, and Blake Lavin, Director of Development Services. Today's topic, growth and how we manage it. How does this increase in population impact City Hall, Penticton residents and businesses, and those visiting our city and the area? What pressure does it place on city infrastructure? Yes, those growing pains, which Penticton really hasn't had to deal with over the years. You know, I moved to the South Okanagan in June of 2014, lived in Penticton since 2018 when I took the morning news job over at Easy Rock. Given we do live on the best place on earth, I was somewhat surprised Penticton's population had not had more steady growth. Then again, I do like the fact we don't have the crazy traffic situation Kelowna has, and I know many of you feel the same way. So, let's get into this. Blake, let's start with you and get to the heart of the topic, the numbers. Back in '86, when Growing Pains was among the top-rated shows, Penticton's population was 24,000. What were the results of the latest Canadian census, Blake?
Sure. So the latest 2021 census data was just released, and it showed Penticton with a population of 36,885, which is actually an increase of over 3,000 people over the previous census year. And that's a 9.3% growth over 5 years. That equates to about 1.8% per year, or 624 new residents per year in Penticton over the past 5 years. And that equates to about 300 new dwellings that we're seeing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that growth. Is it good for Penticton and its residents? Is there such a thing as growing too fast? Anthony, I'll bring you in for that one.
Yeah, for sure. It's every community needs to grow. There's benefits to the business community by having new people move to the community. There's benefits to property tax increases and more just a new diverse population moving to the community, which keeps us moving forward as a city and moving forward as a community as we try and create a great place for new investment to happen, new growth to occur. But there's growing for the sake of growing, and there's growing smartly. And I think it's important to really sort of take note of all the work the city's done over the last few years in terms of planning for that growth over the next few years. So planning for a sustainable future, planning for the growth is certainly a big part of what the city's done, and something that's helped us, I think, accommodate the growth we've seen the last few years really in a sustainable manner.
Yeah, and as the podcast continues, we're going to get into a little more detail here. So let's look at some of those numbers again, from 33,899 in 2016 to 36,881 in 2021. We now rank 13th in BC in population and 7th among the 8 cities in the medium population range. So let's talk about that growth a little bit, and Blake, will bring you back in. How are we managing that growth, and has it been a steady increase over this 5-year census period, or do you sense that the population has increased maybe more in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story because we've just completed an official community plan in 2019, and that plan was based on a much lower growth rate than we've actually been experiencing for the past few years. So we're in a period where we're outpacing the growth or the housing that we thought we would need. Where that leaves us, though, is I think in a fairly healthy position where even though we are at a higher rate than maybe originally planned for, we're still growing at a very sustainable rate. And if you look at the type of housing that we are building, almost 80% of our new housing is a multifamily format. And that's duplex, townhouse, apartments, that's infill. So even though we are adding more people and more housing units to our city, which is limited in geographical size, we are seeing a lot of density increases, which has a lot of positive impacts for the community from a vibrancy perspective, from a use of our infrastructure perspective. So even though we are growing at a quicker pace than we planned for, it's still a very orderly and planned development that we're seeing in our community, and a healthy growth rate.
Yeah, I know you guys are familiar with a recent article in the Globe and Mail entitled "The Housing Density Sweet Spot," and I bring it up for a number of reasons. And I'm thinking of another old '70s TV show here, The Jeffersons. You know the song, "Moving up to the east side to a deluxe apartment in the sky." Moving on up to the east side, we finally get a piece of the pie. So let me ask you about the land we have in Penticton. We have lakes on two sides, mountains on the other two sides, Penticton Indian Band in between. Where and how do we develop given our tight squeeze? Will we all have to move into that deluxe apartment in the sky someday? I guess the question is, should Penticton be growing up, or do we have to grow up?
Yeah, that's a really challenging part of the future growth of the city of Penticton. We're challenged with the hillsides, the geography. The lakes is such an amazing environment that we live in, but it is a challenging thing from a development perspective. So, as Blake mentioned, we're seeing a lot of those smaller, more affordable type of apartments and duplexes and smaller forms of development that are happening in the city, somewhat intentionally to support the smart growth policies that the city has, but also responding to the inability to sprawl as a community. So, and that's one of the positive things I think that we have as a community. You don't see that sprawl that you see in a Kelowna or a bigger city. So there's some opportunities there, but it's a challenge as we try to fit in the growth that we're seeing into the community into some of the more strategic areas in our community.
Yeah. And maybe a follow-up to that, is the dream of a home and a yard unrealistic for people at this point? Are single-family developments part of the future?
Well, they have to be part of the future. They're a high-demand housing product that the community want to see, and new investment and new residents want to see in our city. But perhaps in the future, it's a little different form of single-family home as opposed to a large massive lot that has a huge backyard. Maybe it's a smaller form of home, 1,200 square foot, 1,000 square foot single family home, for example, as opposed to a 4,000 square foot family home, as we try to provide that offering in our community that's challenged with areas to grow in, providing more smaller forms of that single family life for the community into the future. So they're the sort of things our housing policies have been sort of driving towards, again, in recognition of the geography that really constrains our ability to grow outwards.
Yeah. I mean, people are concerned, too, about being displaced by new development, the gentrification of some of our more affordable neighborhoods. So I'm wondering, what goes into developing a community, an area, a new bike lane, along with support from residents and council? But at the heart of it, you must also ensure that you just don't push a vulnerable section of society into another area without giving them the support they need. So what goes into all that? Maybe, Blake, I'll bring you back in for that. When you're planning a community, I know I took a drive out to Sendero Canyon again the other day, preparing for this, thinking about that new community. We don't have to focus on that one, but give us some more detail from a city standpoint. What goes into developing a certain area or a community as it grows?
Sure, and Penticton is a super desirable place. The Okanagan is a really desirable place. We're seeing massive growth rates in Kelowna and regionally, and certainly in Penticton. So that's going to mean that people are going to want to move here internationally. People from other provinces, people from other urban centers in the province are going to be coming here. And the real challenge is, how do you plan for that new growth and still maintain the character of your community. And that's done through the development of an official community plan, which was a process that the city went through, adopting a new official community plan in 2019. And those plans, I think our most recent community plan was probably the largest public engagement effort that the city has ever done. You're going to want to hear from all sectors of the population, existing residents, new residents. There's a big technical review that goes along with that, ensuring that we have the proper infrastructure to handle our growth. But you need to plan for every sector of your population. You need to plan for your vulnerable population. You also need to plan for your innovators and your entrepreneurs and make it an attractive place for them to want to come to as well. So it's really finding that balance, and ultimately it's a city council, your elected officials, that make that decision in adopting that final plan. But it is a real community effort to develop that vision for the future, and then to realize that vision through the processing of development applications and investment in the community, and making sure that investment is coming in and being delivered in a very orderly manner.
Yeah, let me take that maybe a little bit of a step further, and I'm wondering, you've explained the process a bit, but what happens at the very beginning? A developer walks into City Hall and says, "Hey, I've got a chunk of property. I want to develop it." Can you maybe walk us through and give our residents a better understanding of maybe what happens at that point from a staff standpoint before you get it to council? But what do you look at when a developer walks into City Hall at that point?
Yeah, good question. So if a developer comes into the city, they have a property that they want to develop on, high-rise development, as you were mentioning before. The first place that our staff goes is what their zoning is on their property, and or what their official community plan designation is. And those two documents outline the city's vision for every area in our city. And if the development that this investor is proposing doesn't align with those documents, it doesn't mean that they get sent packing. It just means that we start that community conversation, because there's a lot of really good ideas that we didn't envision in some of that earlier planning work. And these plans are made to evolve with new ideas and new investments. So when that development proposal does come forward, we talk to neighbors, we talk to the larger community. And again, it ultimately makes its way to City Council, whether they want to support that level of density on that particular property and what conditions go along with that. A lot of times, the larger community gets benefit from development, not just by getting additional housing units, but contributions to amenities, off-site infrastructure improvements. So there's a lot of benefits that come through the development process.
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here, but I want to talk about the official community plan maybe for a second. Anthony, I'll bring you back in. It's kind of set up for a certain number of years, the growth through a certain stretch. But it seems like we're maybe going faster than what that OCP is set up for. How do you guys work with that from a city staff standpoint? How does that impact you if it continues to grow quicker than what you've kind of set up in the OCP?
Yeah, so Blake mentioned we went through the OCP process about 4 years ago, and I don't think at that stage we expected a pandemic or any of these massive changes across the world that do impact growth potential, development projects that come into the community. And we've set up a pretty robust process in that every 3 to 5 years, we really want to have a look at the growth rates of the city. We're obviously a benefit of the Census data that just came out, and can try and respond and adjust our policies, working with the wider community where we need to change things. Maybe we thought we were right about 5 years ago. We were probably right on a few things, but we probably got it wrong on a number of things as well. But the world changing so quickly, we've got to be able to respond quickly to be able to change our policies and allow for different forms of development to come in, different innovations to be able to accommodate the type of housing and type of community growth we want to see. So it's just making sure we're on top of our game in terms of making sure that we're aware of what needs to change from a policy level, or what's getting in the way of allowing new housing, for example, to occur in the community.
Yeah. Okay. Blake, you want to jump in as well on that?
Yeah. So our official community plan planned for a 30-year growth, and at the rate that we were growing at the time the plan was created, it was to accommodate over 4,000 new residential units. Well, at the rate that we're growing now, we are going to build those units within less than a 10-year period from now. So it doesn't mean that that plan is necessarily out of date. It just means that we're going to be reviewing it, as Anthony mentioned, a lot sooner than we originally anticipated, and having those larger discussions with the community again on how we want to accommodate the next 30 years or 10 years of growth.
Yeah, and let me take development to another kind of level here. I'll refer to my son York. He's in second year studies at UBCO in Kelowna, Bachelor of Arts in Geography, wants to be an urban planner. So we discuss a lot of this. Of course, with the physical side of geography, the lakes, the mountains around us, there's also the human geography side, focusing on the human aspect of urbanism. So figuring out ways of how to plan cities in the future by mixing science and social studies. You're adding a human element to the development of that city. So it's why he tells me that municipal governments are so important. They get to ultimately decide what a city looks like. They choose what goes where. So let me ask you guys about the human side of all this, planning out our city, not just in terms of streets and sidewalks and sewer and water, but what goes where to best accommodate our growing population, our growing pains. So maybe both of you can tackle that one, kind of the human side of how we look at developing our community.
Yeah, and I think like all of our processes in the city, we work with our community, we work with our stakeholders and individuals that actually live in our community and want to see it prosper, and making sure that we can hear from the community what they want to see from a amenity perspective. What type of parks do they want in the community? They're going to help support the range of different housing and commercial and industrial developments that we're going to see moving forward in the community. So it's making sure we get a perspective of the people who are living here, but also ask those people who visit the community that actually want to move here in the future, what sort of things do they want to see in the community? What's missing? That's one of the big questions we ask at the beginning of all of our processes. If we're going through a redevelopment plan or a neighborhood plan for a certain area, what's actually missing from this area that the community would like the city to create some policy to try and drive bringing that amenity or activity or use into the area that the community really want to see.
Yeah, and so let me maybe ask a little bit more about the plans and proposals and how they fit, how we manage the growth in terms of, say, North Gateway. North Wiltsy is now a topic as well. So how do you guys look at some of those and how they fit in as well?
Yeah, I'll speak to North Gateway. Blake can mention the Wiltsy plan that's coming forward. But North Gateway is more of a redevelopment plan that we've been working on the last year or so at the city, that looks at focusing new redevelopment, new commercial investment, housing opportunities in and around the South Okanagan Event Centre complex, which provides a really interesting opportunity to accommodate up to 2,500 new housing units in the city in an infill, in a more sustainable manner for supporting a really strategic growth area of the community. So as part of that process, we're looking at the housing needs, the real estate analysis, the commercial needs, the hotel needs that are going to support the convention center, the event center, and the casino, and all the activities that are going on in that area of town. So it's quite a complex process that we go through looking at all of those things. But it's also taken into consideration looking at the wider city, making sure that this area doesn't compete with the activity that's going on in the downtown and the uses and the vibrancy that we want to create in the downtown and keep moving ahead with. So it's a complex process. It looks at all the land use, real estate components, but also from an infrastructure perspective, how do we actually fund the growth? Is it a partnership with the development industry? Does the city upfront some of those infrastructure costs? How do we actually pay for some of this growth? So they're all the challenging pieces that we look at as part of a redevelopment plan, such as the North Gateway.
Yeah. Blake, I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to give you an easy one here. Rental situations. And obviously it's an important topic in this community. I'm a renter. I have to deal with those types of issues. Developers come in. They may want to look at a proposal for rental units. And there are a lot of people that rent in the community and look to moving here and maybe rent short term until they end up buying a place. So should we approve everything from a development standpoint when it comes to rental housing? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, rentals a real challenge because it's an area that's really been underinvested in the past 25 years, I would say, since the federal and provincial governments stopped building purpose-built rental housing. It's taken until the past few years to see private investment really make big moves into that area. And now with rents being what they are, you actually are seeing a lot of institutional investors building purpose-built rental buildings. For example, in Penticton, we've had 3 large investment firms look at purpose-built rental buildings in Penticton, and they're of hundreds and hundreds of units. So when they're putting up these buildings, they're 60 to 90 units per building, sometimes 2 buildings per site. So we've actually seen a massive increase in our rental stock in Penticton, probably the largest increase that we've seen since the 1960s or 70s in our town. But it's not enough, because we started at a place that was so deficient, and there's been so much demand for housing in Penticton that we could still build probably just as much, and before we start to impact those vacancy rates. So rental is such an important component of the local housing offering, because that's where, whether it's seniors that are looking for rental, whether it's people moving out of their parents' house for the first time, whether it's your people that are supporting the economy through employment, that housing is so key to helping your community thrive, and we need more of it, and we are seeing a lot of interest in constructing more of it.
Yeah, and I guess the next step of that, when we continue with rentals, is making it affordable. I know when the new buildings went in down by Skaha, the prices were somewhat astronomical. I know that's what the market bears, and when developers build these buildings, they're going to get what they can for them based on the market. So how do you, I'm going to take it, you don't have too much control from a city standpoint of keeping it affordable for people, but how does that play into developments from your side of things at City Hall?
Yeah, on the affordability side, I totally agree with you. It's a huge challenge right now, and a lot of communities are facing the same challenges that we are with rental affordability. But you can't look at brand new builds to deliver that affordability. The solution is going to be supply. We need a lot more supply, and then the older housing is going to be the stuff that you hope is going to satisfy some of that affordability, and then the newer stuff, you hope people are going to move into the newer stuff and freeing up units of the older building stock. That's one way. The other way is just direct government investment, because the government can come in and use taxation to construct housing and subsidize it in ways that obviously institutional investors aren't going to subsidize it. So that's a big piece that we are seeing. Again, federal government, provincial government making fairly big overtures towards investment in that area. But again, not enough in the community right now to impact our vacancy rates, which are probably below 1% right now. And certainly on the affordability question, we hear stories of people struggling to find that housing, or if they lose housing, to find something comparable. It's a huge challenge in the community right now.
Anthony, I'm going to take it, maybe it's still too early and you can add to what Blake was talking about, but with the federal budget just coming out recently and the push toward more housing in Canada in general terms that way, how might that impact what we're discussing right now?
Yeah, there's been an incredible amount of funding that's been available from the province, and now we're seeing that through the federal government with the recent budget. And also, I think, important to point out, the city's been very active over the last 5 to 6 years in terms of using city land. We partner with BC Housing on a affordable housing project just on the edge of the downtown, and they're the sort of type of projects that I think we definitely want to continue investing in as a community, utilizing municipal-owned land to lower the cost of actually building some of this housing, which can then relate to lower rental costs and those sort of things. Mm-hmm. Really looking at trying to find the right partners, whether it's BC Housing or the development industry, to help bring those projects to the forefront. As I mentioned earlier, the North Gateway, we really want to see more hotels and commercial, but we actually need to find places for people to live in that are going to work in those industries in the community as well. So making sure we have the right policies to drive some of that into the future is going to be really key to making some of that happen. But perhaps the city does look at getting into the housing game a little bit more than we have in the past. So, yeah. And that's, as I said, looking at the land that the city owns in the right location, or looking at acquiring land to really try and support that housing growth that we really, really need in the community. And then let the development industry provide some of the other housing that we need to really look at making a diverse opportunity of housing choices in the community.
Okay, thanks for that, Anthony. So, Blake, I'll bring you back in maybe to discuss one of the other areas of development that's in people's minds right now, North Wiltsy. What can you say about that?
Yeah, the North Wiltsy block is a much different development and planning exercise than Anthony described with the North Gateway. The Wiltsy area has been identified for residential growth for some decades now, and the development proposal for this section of that is just coming forward. It's out for public engagement right now. This is more of a residential neighborhood, not an urban context. It's right at the eastern edge of Penticton. We're talking about 668 new doors, and it's a mixture of townhousing as well as single family. So it's satisfying a lot of new housing stock that our official community plan identified, and it's one of the last areas that we have for single family residential growth within the current urban boundary of the city. I think the city, the planning department is really excited to get feedback on the plans. I know the developers and their consultants have worked really closely with our planning department on bringing something to council that does meet the intent of our official community plan, and I know council wants to hear from the public on that plan before making a final decision.
Now, here's something for both of you. I want to talk about the changes in city that have taken place over the years, and maybe what stands out. Blake, I'll bring you in to start with this one. What have you seen? You've lived around here for a lot of years now. What changes in the city in recent years stand out for you?
I think overall the investments that City Council and the city have been making in the downtown have really changed the complexion of the downtown and supported the businesses there and from that the surrounding neighborhoods. We've seen a lot of capital investment from the city in the downtown, but we've also seen massive private investment follow that, and people from other communities coming in and saying, "Hey, we want to do business in downtown Penticton." Because you've really invested in your public realm, you've invested in your infrastructure. It's a place that's ready for development. I know when we were developing our downtown plan back in 2013 and planting the seeds for some of the investment to follow, the charrettes that we were doing in the workshops, everybody talked about the downtown being the heart of your community and the health of that downtown being reflective of the health of the community. And I think we're in an amazingly healthy place right now because of those investments that have happened and the private investment that's followed. So I think that's been the most positive trend that we've seen in Penticton in the past little bit.
Anthony, I'll let you jump in as well. Why don't you take a stab at that one? What have you seen that really stands out to you from a positive standpoint?
I think the big thing for me, I moved here in 2009, and there was absolutely nothing going on in the community. 2009, 10, 11, 12. I think one of the years we issued 3 single-family home permits for the entire year. So when you go from that to over 100 on an annual basis, at least in the last few years, it's a pretty exciting place to be. But it's happening because a variety of different people are actually moving to the community. I think it's very evident out in the street, out in the community. We do have a lot more families relocating here. A lot of our economic development strategies over the last 5-6 years have been trying to attract remote workers, young families, young couples to the community that not necessarily need to work out of an office. They can work from home and work anywhere in the world. And we're a pretty unique community that has, I guess, prioritize that through our economic development strategy over the last few years to make that happen. We're seeing some of that happen now. We're seeing more families in the community. We're seeing that type of growth that everyone wanted to see 2009, 10, 11. We're actually now seeing that sort of realized. But again, a big part because of the economic development strategies council and staff and the community have really got behind to try and make some change.
Yeah. And Anthony, I'll keep you at the microphone for a quick sec. One final question maybe that both of you can jump in on, maybe to wrap up. The change that comes with growth, it can be difficult. So maybe a quick thought from each of you, advice that you could give to our citizens when we discuss growth and the difficult nature of it all and trying to get through it all.
Yeah, I think making sure the community are involved in those discussions. We're very good at asking the community what they think. Different pressures on providing different forms of transportation, cycling, pedestrian infrastructure, transit infrastructure in the community as well. So it's really trying to get behind those different things that people are starting to see. The going from a 30-second wait at a 4-way stop to maybe a minute is one of the challenges we hear on a daily basis at some of the intersections, and it's the end of the world. Well, it's that's a growing pain, but it's again a small thing when we look at the benefits coming from the growth that we're going to see in the community. The new people that are moving here, the world's looking at Penticton, and people are moving here from across the country, from across North America, because of the environment that we've been able to create over the last few years.
Yeah, Blake, I'll let you jump in on that one. Your advice to citizens.
Yeah, I think it's just trust in the process. We have a great official plan in place right now. We are growing a bit faster than we originally anticipated, but that doesn't mean that the plan isn't still totally relevant. And when there are deviations to that plan, rest assured that there will be full community conversations. Anthony talked about our public engagement program, and second to none, I think the work that our engagement team does into understanding people's feelings on projects that are coming forward is really helpful, and council for the most part has been really receptive to the feedback that they've received from the public. But we have really robust processes in place that ensure that decisions are made in a smart manner, and decisions are made that are consistent with the plan that was developed through all the community consultation that was done. So trust the process, and we are a very desirable place to live. So we're going to get lots of interest for development here.
Yes, indeed, we do live in the best place on earth. I'm certain about that. Anthony and Blake, thanks for the insight into the growing pains we're experiencing here in Penticton. Again, our guest today, Anthony Haddad, General Manager of Community Services, Blake Lavin, Director of Development Services. One thing we do want to say about PenTALKton, we do want to thank the people here at CFuzz, Peach City Radio. They've brought us into their studios, given us a professional atmosphere to work in, and we certainly want to acknowledge the board of directors and everybody who is part of CFuzz. They've accommodated us and allowed us to come in here to record today. Okay, to wrap up this podcast, I want to remind you the ways you can get involved in the community. I know Anthony referred to it. Do check out shapeyourcitypenticton.ca. Let's all work toward a community which looks after its own, welcomes others with open arms, and continues to provide us with the best place on earth to live. And of course, please join us next time on PenTALKton. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Dale Corey. Until next time, Penticton.